Welcome to Exploring the Prophetic. Today I have Pastor Denise Goulet, who is the pastor of ICLV, which is International Church of Las Vegas, with her husband, Paul. And they're so uniquely positioned in Las Vegas. They inherited the church, which I'm going to ask them that story when we talk about this. But they inherited a church in Las Vegas that they turned from like maybe a 200-member church into a multi-thousand-member church with so many services, so many activities. They do so much in the city of Las Vegas. And they do humanitarian stuff, outreach stuff, supernatural ministry. They have a school, they have internships, they have services. They just have so much going on. It's like a living entity, as a church. But it came through her and Paul's encounters with God. And God ended up encountering Denise and really speaking to her about her prophetic calling. And she's been activating people in the prophetic for now a little over a decade, and or maybe even 15 years. And Denise, one of the things I love about her the most is that her and Paul, they are winning in life. Like Paul has a master's degree in Christian counseling, and it comes through in all of his teachings. But they have these amazing kids. They have 3 amazing kids, and they have all their in-laws. The kids have all been married, and they have 11 grandchildren. And their kids are in ministry with them. They're doing amazing. But she tells a very different story sometimes when she gets to share her family history, because she wants to be vulnerable so people can learn that God can change your story. And so I love that so much about her and Paul, because they started out in one place. I mean, she was a Catholic girl from French Canada who ended up marrying Paul, who's also was Canadian at the time, move into America, and they ended up in Sacramento for a number of years, and God called them to Las Vegas for city transformation. So I'm excited about our interview, because you're going to hear a very vulnerable starting place to this amazing family who is now just rocking the world through Las Vegas. Today on Exploring the Prophetic, we have one of our dear friends. It's pastors from the church my wife, Cherie, came from, Pastor Denise Goulet. And without Denise, I wouldn't have my wife. So I'm so grateful to her and Paul for all that they've done. But Denise is an incredible woman. She's a prophet in her own right, but also just her life of going into Las Vegas, which I'm hoping we'll talk about today, and seeing such a burden for a people group that was pretty much disowned by the majority of the church in Las Vegas, and going after it. When we first planted a church in Los Angeles, I remember, Denise, I would, text you guys, call you, email you, whenever I visited you, ask you a million questions, because I was like, how do we reach these people? Because you guys were some of the only pastors in America that I knew that were hearing God about like this disenfranchised entertainment people group and people in like a hard city. You've been such an inspiration just for years, but it's about you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So good to be here with you.
Oh, I'm so glad you're on. And I hear your accent. Our listeners may not know you're French Canadian, which is really amazing.
Yes.
And God sent you guys.
Yes. After all these years, I've been in the States for 36 years, and I'm still French Canadian. Yeah.
It's good though. I mean, that's your identity. I love it. I love your and Paul's just even heart for French-speaking people because of it, which is amazing, because a lot of people lose their identity, and you haven't done that. Well, let me tell you this. You're one of my favorite people. We've had some real God journeys together, but I'm going to talk about your God journey specifically into Las Vegas, because it's such a wild one, into the prophetic. So take us on a journey.
Okay. Well, listen, we came to Las Vegas in 1992, and that was after we had been in Sacramento at a big church. Like there was 5,000 people there. Paul was one of the, associate pastors. He was very successful in a sense that he had started a counseling center, and he had like 18 therapists working for him, seeing 250 families a week.
Wow.
We had like a Sunday school of 450 people in the church.
That's
so
crazy.
It was a Sunday school. And so just to say, he was doing really well and impacting lots of people. And in the meantime, I was a mom at home, and I was still not knowing really what I was all about.
Yeah.
All I knew is I was an athlete when he met me. 12 years prior.
You're still an athlete. We have to say that. Denise can out-push up anybody listening right now, I promise.
I can invite anyone to some sort of competition, but I love to compete. And
I love it.
I love it. But so I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be or to do. All I knew is I was a good Christian mom, but I had a lot of fears. I wasn't sure about my identity and my destiny and all that. But what I knew is my husband was very good at what he was doing. And one day he went to the Philippines he was developing and writing a curriculum to help, churches and all that, because he does have a master's degree in pastoral counseling. So, but then when he was walking on the streets of the Philippines, he saw people and families living in boxes. Wow. And the poverty and the need, for love and for God. And then he said to the Lord, I will do anything. Lord, I'm pretty much, pretty good at what I'm doing right now. It's pretty easy. We're successful. That whole talk.
Yeah.
But he says, I'll do anything. Like when I see this, the world needs Jesus, So on his way back to Sacramento at the time, he got a word from God. And he felt like God was telling him, you're going to be the pastor at West Valley Assembly in Las Vegas. That was the name of the church when we took it. And he knew about this little church, about 150 to 200 people, because he had done some seminars on how to prevent your children from sexual abuse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and he had spoken at this church who Robert Douglas had started 5 years prior. Anyways, all this to say that he kind of disregarded the thought. And when he got home, though, Robert Douglas called him and said, hey, listen, I'm leaving the church. And I was asking God about my successor, and your face came, was dropped in front of me.
Oh, wow.
Basically, I saw your face, as the one who's supposed to take this church. And he thought that was pretty incredible because he had a warning in the plane that was coming. So, but I didn't know any of that. I didn't know.
Was that like good for you or not good for you? Were you like, I don't want to do this, or I do want to do this?
No, that wasn't good for me, because I was convinced that Paul was not really called to be the senior pastor, that they call. And I was convinced that I didn't want to be a pastor's wife, the typical at the time.
And
that was a long time ago.
You were not a pastor's wife typical at the time.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
But I didn't want to have to.
No, it's painful.
Go into that role. It's painful. Like polyester dresses, or you look most of them look miserable in the back seat of whatever, and then they have to work in a nursery only, or play the piano or the organ. And so I didn't fit any of these. And I'm like, oh well. And I actually kind of threw a fit, and I was a little immature. That was 25 years ago. I actually went in the laundry room and I screamed in the laundry pile of laundry. I just screamed in there because I was so afraid of failure. I didn't know who I was. I had a lot of anger, and that was kind of like the secret. I had I was a frustrated person.
Wow.
And I didn't abuse my kids, but I was pretty hard on them, with perfectionism. And so that was my frustration and what I was trying to work out. But as a result, I didn't feel good about myself. So all this to say, I didn't really want to go. But then Paul said, hey, I know you're a praying woman. Well, I want you to know, Shawn, I wasn't a praying woman. I wasn't even in the Bible.
Wow.
I come from a Catholic background. I never went to Bible college, so I just loved God, but in a very limited way, and did not walk in revelation. So he says, listen, I trust your relationship with the Lord. If you really truly believe after you pray about this that we're not to go, I will call Robert Douglas and I will tell him no. And all of a sudden, it's like the fear of God came on me. And I'm like, I better not be the one to get in the way of my husband's calling,
wow.
You see, at the time. And so I started to pray about it, and I started to get excited about the idea, actually. And so, of course, we end up there. And it was because we both were in agreement about it. But it just completely changed my life. And the second time that I actually got a revelation, in the middle of the night is when I had been there about a year. And it's like the Lord woke me up. I started to read the Bible. I started to pray. I started to discover, the Lord in a different way, a relationship instead of a religion. Because I do come from a religious structure of a church. I was a good churchgoer as a Catholic. And Paul is the one who brought me to the Lord when, he met me at the University of Ottawa at the age of 19. So I was starting to have a relationship with the Lord, and he brought me to Proverbs 15:1, and he said, it's a harsh word turns away wrath, but a gentle answer is, a harsh word stirs up anger, but a gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yeah.
And the Lord started to work on me and just said, I'm going to do incredible things in you and through you, in your family, in your church, in this city. But you're in the way with that anger of yours is in the way.
Wow.
This is not my heart. And I'm like, and I started to weep for 2 hours, Shawn. I was weeping and just asking God to forgive me. And he was showing me how I was crushing my kids' spirit, with my control issues, because I'm afraid of failure, afraid to speak English,
Wow.
in front of people, because I'm still really French. I understand it, can speak it, but not publicly, not on a platform.
Yeah.
And so he asked me, he brought some healing there. And I said, I'll do anything, Lord. And he says, I want on Mother's Day, which is 4 days down the road there. 4 days.
I mean, you've never shared publicly this way before.
No.
You have an encounter
never.
with God and you're like, here it goes.
Exactly.
Vulnerability too.
Right away. And I said, share my problem with anger? Yeah. Usually you share the testimony.
Yeah.
Not the problem. Yeah. And he said, yes. I said, well, the only way I'm going to do it, I'm going to put a little fleece. If Paul asked me to do it, I will. And I went back to bed. The next day he asked me what I was up to. And I told him everything. Please forgive me for my anger. Please and all of that. Because, and I'll ask the kids, forgive me. And we'll talk. And I'll go for counseling and all of that. And then my husband says, babe. And I'm like, oh no. He goes, because I didn't tell him that God had said, I want you to share this. I didn't tell him that.
Hiding it.
And he says, because I have 2 biblical moms. I'm going to preach Sunday. It's Mother's Day. But I need an example of a contemporary mom.
Wow.
But I felt so much like a failure as a mom because of my lack of my perfectionism. That's what it was. Every Mother's Day was a struggle for me.
Wow.
So I said, I can't believe you're asking me this. But I said, I have to say yes. So that was my first big yes.
So what happened?
So this is what happened. So I share this with Robin because she's on our staff by then. And we're about to have a mother-daughter banquet right before the day before Mother's Day. And Robin asked me if I could share that at the mother-daughter banquet, and my daughters will be there.
Oh,
and
wow.
What a beautiful thing this will be for the moms. And so I got up there and I said, okay. I said yes again. And I said, okay. I said, I just want to, share with you what happened Thursday night. And God brought me to Proverbs 15. And I asked my girls to forgive me in front of everyone.
Wow.
And my little girls, she was 11 and 7 at the time. My little girls had tears coming down.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, I get it. It's a beautiful story.
And then they had a contest among some of the girls. And they wrote letters why my mom is the best mom. And they would pick winning letters, and the girls would read them in front of the banquet, those that were at the banquet, that one that I shared with. And my daughter's letter was picked as one of them. And I had no idea. And then I'm so sorry.
No, I'm so glad. This is so beautiful. Keep going.
And so in the letter, she ended her letter by saying, one day, I want to be just like my mom.
Wow.
And I was freaking out inside because I thought, no, you don't want to be like me. And immediately the Holy Spirit stopped me in my tracks and he said, she sees you the way I see you.
Wow.
She sees you as you are becoming. She sees what you don't see in you. It's so prophetic. And she knows that you're not as bad as you think you are.
Wow.
She sees the good in you. And then the next day I shared in a church. I did the same thing, and I even asked my husband to forgive me. And I started to get letters from people. I never got letters before.
Yeah.
I started to get letters from people, and I got one from a veteran in the war, and he says, I want to thank you for sharing because you gave me permission to ask my kids to forgive me.
Wow.
as an adult, after going through the war. And he goes, I didn't know I could ask my kids to forgive me for my, my mistakes and my shortcomings as a father. And it started, if you're going to say that, my ministry.
Wow.
Because it was a ministry of vulnerability, a ministry of love, of second chance, of knowing that it's a process to become the person that God has created to be, you to be. And in a city like Las Vegas, we need real.
Oh, it makes so much sense.
Authentic. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me. I'll just interject real fast. It's interesting to me
Yes.
that like you guys birthed the church really out of your vulnerability. And this church was probably going for a long time. And I don't know many people, I've heard you share many times, especially because you guys host your services for real. Like you and Paul, just our mom and dad, you guys host, and you always are sharing. Like when your brother passed away just this year, and you had to be honest with your people, and you didn't hold it back. You just said, hey, this is really hard for me, but I felt to be present here, but it's really hard for me because of what I just went through. And so I just want you to know, and you like used the story of what you're going through as a push through for everybody else, like to help, like your process was going to help heal their process. And I think it's really unique in the prophetic to have, the prophetic's been known for not having vulnerability. And as long as I've known you, you've been, part of your story is that your breakthrough is everyone else's breakthrough, which is really unique. So you can go back in your story. I just wanted to point that out in the story.
It's powerful. And and from there, I began to realize that it was more important to be real, authentic,